The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, but the air crackled with something sharper, raw, unfiltered contempt. Judge Harold Grayson, perched high on his bench, sneered down at the woman before him, his voice dripping with venom as he spat, "You people always think you can game the system." Those words, jagged and deliberate, sliced through the room, silencing the murmurs of the crowd and pinning Officer Lena Carter, a black woman in her 30s, under the weight of his disdain. Lena stood rigid, her police uniform pressed to perfection, her badge gleaming under the courtroom's harsh lights. She wasn't here as a defendant but as a witness, testifying in a case that had already frayed her nerves. The defendant, a young black man named Jamal, sat shackled at the defense table, his eyes fixed on the floor. Grayson's words weren't just an insult, they were a spark tossed into a room doused with gasoline. Lena's fists clenched at her sides, her pulse hammering as she fought the urge to respond. She knew the game, one wrong word, and she'd be the one in cuffs. Grayson leaned forward, his jowls quivering as he continued, oblivious to the storm brewing below. "I've seen your kind before, Officer Carter. Always stirring trouble, always playing the victim." The gallery gasped, a low ripple of shock spreading through the onlookers. Jamal's public defender, a wiry man named Tom Ellis, shot to his feet, his objection drowned out by Grayson's gavel slamming down like a guillotine. "Sit down, Ellis, or you'll join her in contempt," the judge roared, his face reddening. Lena's eyes locked onto Grayson's, her stare unyielding. She'd faced worse slurs whispered in precinct hallways, suspicious glances from neighbors, the weight of a badge that some believed she didn't deserve. But this was different. This was a judge, a man cloaked in authority, wielding his power like a blunt weapon. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as if the walls themselves were closing in to witness the collision. "Excuse me, Your Honor," Lena said, her voice steady but laced with steel, "but my kind has kept this city safe while you sit up there throwing insults." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and the courtroom erupted. Spectators whispered, reporters scribbled furiously, and Grayson's face twisted into a mask of fury. He pounded his gavel again, the sound echoing like gunfire. "You dare speak to me like that?" he bellowed. "I'll have you stripped of your badge." The threat hung heavy, but Lena didn't flinch. She'd spent years proving herself in a world that questioned her worth daily. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "Hold your head high, Lena. They'll try to break you, but you're stronger than their hate." She straightened her shoulders, her gaze never leaving Grayson's. "Try it," she said, her voice low but carrying the weight of a challenge. Grayson's hand trembled as he pointed at her. "Bailiff, remove this woman," he shouted. The bailiff, a burly man named Mike, hesitated, his eyes darting between Lena and the judge. Mike knew Lena from the precinct. She'd backed him up on a rough call last year, her quick thinking saving them both from a knife-wielding suspect. Loyalty tugged at him, but so did fear of Grayson's wrath. Before Mike could move, Tom Ellis stood again, his voice shaking but firm. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. Officer Carter is a decorated officer, and your comments are blatantly discriminatory." The gallery buzzed louder, a mix of outrage and disbelief. A woman in the back row, clutching a worn purse, shouted, "Shame on you, Judge." The cry ignited others, and soon the room was a chorus of dissent. Grayson's face purpled. "Silence," he roared, slamming his gavel so hard it skidded off the bench and clattered to the floor. The sound was a punctuation mark, a signal that the line had been crossed. Lena saw her opening not just to defend herself, but to turn the tide. She stepped forward, her boots clicking on the hardwood floor. "Your Honor," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade, "you've just threatened a police officer in open court. That's intimidation, a Class A misdemeanor under state law." The room fell silent, every eye on her. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small notepad she always carried, flipping it open with deliberate calm. "And your remarks? They're on record. Every reporter in this room heard you." Grayson froze, his mouth half open, the color draining from his face. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Lena pressed on, her voice rising with controlled fury. "You've abused your power, insulted me, and disrespected this court. And I'm not just a witness today, I am an officer of the law." She reached for the handcuffs clipped to her belt, the metal glinting under the lights. "Judge Harold Grayson, you're under arrest for official misconduct and intimidation." The courtroom exploded. Spectators leaped to their feet, some cheering, others shouting in disbelief. Reporters scrambled for their phones, live tweeting the unprecedented scene. Mike, the bailiff, stood rooted, his jaw slack. Tom Ellis gaped, his objection forgotten. Jamal, still shackled, lifted his head, a spark of hope in his eyes for the first time that day. Grayson stammered, his hands gripping the edge of the bench. You can't do this. I'm a judge." His voice cracked, betraying the panic clawing at his composure. Lena stepped closer, her cuffs dangling from one hand. "The law applies to everyone," she said, her tone unshakable. "Even you." Mike finally moved, but not toward Lena. He positioned himself between her and Grayson, his hands raised in a gesture of calm. "Lena, are you sure about this?" he whispered, his eyes pleading. She nodded, her resolve ironclad. "He crossed a line, Mike. You know it." The bailiff hesitated, then stepped aside. Lena ascended the steps to the bench, each one echoing with purpose. Grayson shrank back, his bravado crumbling. "This is outrageous," he spluttered, but his voice was thin, almost pleading. Lena snapped the cuffs around his wrists, the click reverberating through the silent courtroom. The man who'd wielded power like a sledgehammer now looked small, his shoulders slumped, his eyes darting for an escape that didn't exist. As she led him down from the bench, the crowd parted, a mix of awe and disbelief on their faces. Jamal's mother, seated in the front row, clutched her son's hand through the bars of his holding area, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered to Lena, her voice breaking. Lena gave her a small nod, her heart pounding but her face composed. The reporters surged forward, cameras flashing, questions flying. "Officer Carter, what prompted this? Is this retaliation?" Lena ignored them, guiding Grayson toward the side door where court security waited, their faces a mix of shock and grudging respect. She knew the headlines would be brutal, the fallout unpredictable. But in that moment, she felt something she hadn't in years, the weight of justice, real and unyielding, in her hands. Outside the courtroom, the hallway was a blur of activity, officers, reporters, court staff, all buzzing with the news. Lena handed Grayson off to a pair of stunned deputies, who took him toward the holding area. She caught her breath, the adrenaline still coursing through her. Tom Ellis caught up to her, his face flushed. "Lena, that was, I don't even know what to say. You just turned this whole case upside down." "It's not about the case," she said quietly. "It's about what's right." Tom nodded, his expression a mix of admiration and worry. "You know they'll come for you now. The system protects its own." "Let them try," Lena said, her voice steady. She'd been fighting her whole life against prejudice, against doubt, against a world that too often saw her skin before her badge. This was just another battle, and she was ready. Back in the courtroom, the crowd was still buzzing, the air thick with tension and possibility. Jamal's mother approached Lena, her hands trembling as she reached out. "You gave my boy hope today," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You showed him the law can work for us, too." Lena swallowed hard, the weight of those words settling deep. She hadn't just arrested a judge, just cracked open a door, letting light into a system too often shrouded in shadow. As the day wore on, the story spread like wildfire. Social media erupted with hashtags Justice for Jamal, Officer Carter, Courtroom Takedown. News vans parked outside the courthouse, reporters clamoring for interviews. Lena avoided them, slipping out a side exit to her squad car. She sat behind the wheel, staring at the dashboard, her hands still shaking from the adrenaline. Her phone buzzed with messages, support from colleagues, threats from strangers, and a text from her mother, "I'm proud of you, Lena. Always." She closed her eyes, letting the words anchor her. The road ahead would be brutal investigations, hearings, maybe even retaliation. Grayson's allies would close ranks, and the system would fight to protect itself. But Lena had never backed down from a fight, and she wasn't about to start now. She'd arrested a judge, not just for his words but for what they represented, a world that judged her before it knew her, a world she was determined to change. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Lena started the engine, her mind already turning to the next step. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing: she'd face it head-on, badge and all. Lena drove through the city, the skyline a blur of steel and glass against the fading sunset. Her squad car felt like a sanctuary, the hum of the engine drowning out the chaos of the day. But her mind was a storm, replaying Grayson's sneer, the click of the cuffs, the weight of every eye in that courtroom. She'd crossed a line no one had dared to cross before, and the consequences were already clawing at her. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, texts from colleagues, voicemails from reporters, and a single message from her captain: "Come to the station. Now." She pulled into the precinct lot, the gravel crunching under her tires. The station was a hive of activity, officers glancing her way with a mix of awe and unease. Captain Ruiz, a grizzled veteran with a face like weathered stone, waited in his office. He didn't rise when she entered, just pointed to a chair. "Sit," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "You've got the whole damn city talking, Carter." Lena sat, her posture rigid. "I did what was right, Captain. Grayson broke the law, and he doesn't get a pass because he wears a robe." Ruiz leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Right or not, you've poked a bear. The mayor's office called. The DA's livid. And Grayson's got friends in high places, judges, politicians, you name it. They're already spinning this as an attack on the judiciary." Lena's jaw tightened. "Let them spin. I've got the court transcript, witnesses, and video from the reporters. He threatened me, insulted me, and disrespected the badge. If they want a fight, I'll give them one." Ruiz studied her, his eyes narrowing. "You're a good cop, Lena. One of the best. But this could cost you everything: your badge, your career, maybe more." She met his gaze, unflinching. "If standing up to a bigot costs me my badge, then it's a badge not worth having." Ruiz sighed, a rare flicker of respect crossing his face. "All right, Carter. You're on administrative leave pending an investigation. Keep your head down and your mouth shut. This is bigger than you now." Lena left the office, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. She knew the system would fight back hard. Grayson wasn't just a judge, he was a symbol of power, and symbols don't fall easily. By morning, the headlines were relentless: rogue cop arrests judge in shocking courtroom standoff, racial tensions erupt in city courthouse. Some called her a hero, others a vigilante. Social media was a battlefield. Supporters shared videos of her cuffing Grayson, while detractors slung slurs and threats. A hashtag, Lena Carter, trended alongside Justice for Jamal, but so did Back the Bench, with Grayson's allies painting him as a victim of woke overreach. At home, Lena sat on her couch, the TV muted as news anchors dissected her life. Her mother, Clara, called, her voice a lifeline. "You did what I raised you to do," Clara said, her tone fierce with pride. "But you need to be careful, baby. They'll come for you with everything they've got." Lena nodded, though her mother couldn't see. "I know, Mama. But I'm not backing down." The next day, Lena met with Tom Ellis, Jamal's public defender, at a diner across town. The place smelled of grease and coffee, a safe haven from the media storm. Tom slid into the booth, his tie loose and his eyes bloodshot. "You've got balls, Lena," he said, shaking his head. "But this case just got 10 times harder. Grayson's team is pushing to dismiss Jamal's charges, claiming bias. They're saying your arrest taints the whole proceeding. Lena's stomach twisted. Jamal, the young man she'd been testifying for, was caught in the crossfire. He'd been arrested for a minor drug charge, but Grayson's courtroom had turned it into a spectacle, painting him as a menace. They're using me to save Grayson, she said, her voice low. Tom nodded. Exactly. But I've got an idea. The transcript of Grayson's rant is gold-clear evidence of bias. If we can get it in front of the right judge, we can turn this around. Lena leaned forward, her coffee untouched. What do you need from me? Tom hesitated, then said, testify again. Not just about Jamal's case, but about Grayson. Make it public, undeniable. Force the system to face itself. It was a gamble exposing herself to more scrutiny, more hate. But Lena saw Jamal's face in her mind, the spark of hope in his eyes when she'd cuffed Grayson. I'm in, she said. The hearing was set for a week later, in a different courtroom with Judge Maria Alvarez presiding. Alvarez was known for her fairness, a rare beacon in a system often clouded by politics. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Lena took the stand, her uniform crisp, her badge a quiet defiance. She recounted Grayson's words, his threats, the way he'd wielded his power like a weapon. The gallery hung on her every word, the weight of her testimony sinking in. Grayson's attorney, a slick man named Victor Crane, tried to tear her apart. Officer Carter, isn't it true you acted out of personal vendetta? He pressed, his tone oily. Lena's eyes narrowed. No, sir. I acted because a judge broke the law in front of me. If I let that slide, what's the point of my badge? Crane faltered, the crowd murmuring in approval. Alvarez's gavel silenced them, but her eyes held a glint of respect. Jamal took the stand next, his voice steady despite the shackles. He spoke of his life growing up in a neighborhood where hope was scarce, where cops were more feared than trusted. Officer Carter didn't just arrest a judge, he said, his voice breaking. She showed me the law could be fair. That it could see me. The words hit Lena like a punch, her throat tightening. Alvarez deliberated for 2 days, the city holding its breath. When she returned, her ruling was clear: Grayson's conduct warranted his removal from the bench, and Jamal's charges were dismissed for judicial bias. The courtroom erupted, cheers mixing with boos. Lena felt a weight lift, but she knew the fight wasn't over. Grayson's allies were already filing appeals, and the investigation into her actions loomed. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, supporters with signs reading, "Justice for Lena," counter-protesters shouting about judicial overreach. Lena faced them, her chin high. A reporter thrust a microphone in her face. "Officer Carter, do you regret arresting Judge Grayson?" Lena paused, then said, "I regret that a judge thought he could break the law and get away with it. I don't regret holding him accountable." The crowd roared, some in support, others in anger. Weeks later, Lena sat in a disciplinary hearing, her badge on the line. The panel, a mix of police brass and city officials, grilled her for hours. "You disrupted the system," one said, his tone accusing. Lena leaned forward, her voice calm but fierce. "The system was already broken. I just shone a light on it." The room fell silent, the truth of her words undeniable. In the end, Lena kept her badge, but the cost was steep. She was reassigned to a desk job, a quiet punishment for rocking the boat. But the city was changing. Jamal enrolled in community college, inspired by Lena's stand. Protests erupted, demanding reform in the courts. Lena became a symbol, not just of resistance but of hope, a hope that justice could be more than a word. One evening, Lena visited her mother's house, the smell of fried chicken filling the air. Clara pulled her into a hug, her eyes shining. "You changed things, Lena. Not just for you, but for all of us." Lena smiled, the weight of the past weeks easing. She'd fought, And she'd won not just for herself, but for Jamal, for her community, for the idea that the law could bend toward fairness. As she stepped outside, the night sky stretched wide above her. The stars felt closer, brighter, as if they too had witnessed her stand. She thought of Grayson, now facing his own trial, stripped of his robe and his power. She thought of Jamal, free and dreaming of a future. And she thought of the city, fractured but stirring, grappling with its own truths. What do you think? Where does justice lie in a system that protects its own? Share your thoughts on right, wrong, and the fight for fairness.